Okay, good afternoon. My name is Shelby Long. I am the twice exceptional mom, and I'm so excited today because I'm here with Attorney April Kelly Neal, Esquire. And today we're going to be talking about 504 plans, IEPs, and Texas versus Becerra. It's a lawsuit that parents with special needs children really need to make sure they're tuned into and they're aware of. Georgia is one of the states that is involved in it, and we're going to talk about that. But before I get to that, I have to tell you a lot of wonderful things about Miss April Kelly Neal. So, Miss Neal is a member of the Georgia Bar's Advocates for Students with Disabilities Committees, Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, COPA, and Georgia Can. She has hosted the Rights Law, Special Education, and Law Advocacy Conference in Georgia 3 times. And she volunteers with Georgia Legal Services Program representing students in education matters. Ms. Neal's mission is to inform the public of their rights as it relates to education in Georgia so the public education is better for everyone. And Ms. April Kelly Neal is also an exceptional mom. Because I want you to, can you tell them what makes you exceptional about what made you get into this type of law?
Because my child, my first one, had autism. Of course, I didn't know that. I just, until I think he was first grade. It was at the end of the first grade when we sort of figured that out because we had him evaluated. But that whole first year of his first grade, his teacher was kind of segregating him and putting him in the back of the class and having him color and do things like that. And his and his IQ was fine. It was just the autism. And so I guess she just didn't think that he was worth teaching. Anyway, um, I became homicidal, but I didn't kill anybody.
And we're so proud
And
of you and thankful that you did not go that route, even though it may seem tempting at times.
yeah, I was just like, I don't care if you think he fell off Mars. It's your job to teach him and figure it out. I mean, teach him something. I mean, he doesn't, but thankfully, and I think that kind of experience could actually hurt a child's self-esteem
Yes.
to not be taught. Thankfully, my child had the whole a different attitude. He was like, I don't have to do this work. Y'all can do this, you chumps, And then
Right.
I'm kind of thankful he did have that attitude because it didn't affect his self-esteem. But boy, did it really, it sent me into a rage. And I thought, dear Lord, if you ever get me out of this, I promise I will use this
Yes.
experience
And I
to
think,
help other
I know for
people.
myself personally, and I'm sure for, some of the other parents and even grandparents watching, like that is a familiar thing because I think a lot of it stems from ignorance. I'm a 20-year vet in education at this point, but even when I first started teaching, there wasn't a big emphasis or education about autism and what autism looks like. And a lot of autistic behaviors, they look like they might be oppositional defiance disorder, or it looks like a child may be lazy or disengaged, but that's not necessarily the case. And one of the things I had to say in my son's IEP meeting, I said, the whole thing with autism in the past, they're moving away from this symbolism, but in the past, they would use the symbol of the puzzle piece because every child was different. And the whole thing is they go into their own little world. So we have literally,
Yeah.
two options. We need to either draw them out so they can get into our world with us and we can work with them that way, or we need to figure out where they are and get in there with them and make them feel comfortable and make them feel accepted and make them want to learn. And I think that again, it's not been taught enough to educators. And I like to always emphasize this because again, I'm 20 years in. They don't require us to be special education certified. That's not something that we all have to do. So we take different courses, but we all have different specialties. But it's really looking like the way that society is going, that might be a best practice to get everyone special education trained and also to make them aware of special education laws like you and I are going to speak about today. Because as a classroom teacher, you may be handed an IEP and it may have all these things in it, but you might not know the legal ramifications of not following through, or you might not know how to request support because you're having difficulty implementing it because that's one child that may be really high need in a classroom of 25 or 30 kids. And that's a real issue for educators as well. Um, so
Absolutely.
I think that what you're saying about your son, it definitely makes total sense. I just feel like it's just a lot of ignorance, and I hope that today we can
Well,
dispel some of that.
yeah, and at the beginning, I wish parents would do this. This is what I did is I gave you can stream stuff now, but back in the day when my kid was in school, I would give them a DVD of the movie Temple
Brandon.
Grandin,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a fun way, and then some popcorn and sort of just to sort of educate them, but in a fun way,
Right.
and so that they could see the potential in my child. And then I wrote a letter of introduction, but I know that there are parents out there that don't do that and probably may not even be capable of doing that. But it would be
Right.
nice if teachers kind of had heads up on a little bit of
Oh, I
that.
agree. I've had to
Um,
do some of that this year, like with my class, because I do teach at the school where my son attends. And there was like one issue one day where he was brought to the classroom because he had another issue and he was being repetitive because, sometimes kids with autism, they'll repeat the same thing over and over again. They fixate really easily. And some of my
oh yeah,
second graders, they were laughing at him. And so, like, I had to have a conversation with them, and I'm like, hey, my son has autism and ADHD. And I know he was saying over and over again, I want muffin, I want muffin, I want muffin. And I said, and I know it was very funny to you all. I said, but he really could not get that idea out of his head. And I said, and even though he may be repetitive, and he does have a speech language delay, my son does as well. I said, he's extremely bright. I said, he reads better than some of my second graders, and he's only in kindergarten and he started reading last year in 4K. And again, that's why I'm very much about this twice exceptionality and making sure that people realize when I'm saying I'm the twice exceptional mom, it's not like, oh, I'm the mom that's better than all the other moms. It's like, no, I'm the mom that has a child that is bona fide gifted, getting served in reach, and that's her exceptionality under Georgia law. And she has some quirks and things about her. I'm pretty sure she probably needs to be on some ADHD meds as well. And then I have my son who's ADHD, ASD, all these speech language delay, but brilliant. He's brilliant. And I'm fully
yeah,
convinced in 2 years, he's going to be in somebody's gifted class, right? But we just have to
yep,
educate them. I think what you said about using Temple Grandin was really good. What I do with my class, because Sesame Street has been very inclusive, I use Abby, not Abby, I'm sorry, Julia is their new character, and she's autistic, and they explain a lot of different things with her, and she's a good character to use with the small kids, and it helps them build empathy. And that's the bigger part of it all, too. I think when you were talking about your son being isolated, I think that's the part that's missing is empathy because would you want
yeah,
to be isolated from the rest of your class from the rest of the class if that were if to the teacher if that were your child would you want your child separated consistently made to feel like well we're over here and you're over there like we have to work to bring everyone together.
yep. And empathy is also what's lacking in this lawsuit.
Yes, it is lacking. Do we want to get straight to it or we want to talk about can we talk to them a little bit about the difference between 504 plans and IEPs a little bit first?
Yeah, I mean, you're
Okay.
the driver of this. I hate to kind of talk about things and it's not addressing, what anybody wants to hear. So if there
Yeah.
are questions, I'll take them during your spiel.
Absolutely. And people can put if you have a question, I'm making sure I swap it so I can view the chat box. If you have a question, if you drop it in the chat, either I or Attorney Neal will answer it for you. But we definitely want to get into the meat of it all because we were talking about it before. It's a lot to take into consideration. But I got a really good visual. Actually, I wonder if I can share my screen. Let's see if it will let me do it. I think I can. Let me know if it is showing. Is it showing?
Well, it says that oh, there it is. I see
Okay,
it.
perfect. Okay. So, So this is a nice little Venn diagram, and that actually kind of is perfect because my logo's a Venn diagram too. It's just hearts, but it's going between the differences between a 504 and IEP. I want to thank Tanya Coombs for sharing this visual with me. It's from around the campfire. So if you see on the what's to my left, the 504 plan, it's medical. It covers any disability, provides accommodations to the child's environment, not the curriculum. Follows students throughout their life. It has a process with forms and structure that differs per state and school. For IEP, and I don't know if that's in the way, I'm gonna scoot that. It's one or more of the 13 disabilities listed in IDEA, and that's the Individuals with Disabilities Act. Education Act. It provides accommodations to the environment and may include modifications to the curriculum. And when I think about modifications to the curriculum, like a simple way I would explain it would be like a child who has ADHD, like my son, he's not going to do homework. Like they may assign it, but they don't need to penalize him for not doing it because once his medication is worn off, at the end of the day, he literally does not have the bandwidth to do that. Or maybe if he does do it, if everyone else is doing 10 questions, maybe he's doing 5. It follows the student throughout the school. It has strict rules and processes, and every school has to follow. Now, both of these are legal documents, and that goes back into what we were discussing with training that, you would think that teachers would be versed in education law, but that's not something we're required to take, even though it does affect us. It's meant to level the educational playing field and moving away from using the term special education, but for people with their exceptionalities to make sure that they're getting what they need so that they can do the things that their peers can do. For example, a child with a visual impairment might need large print. A child with a hearing impairment might have a teacher who has a box that amplifies sounds, particularly for that child that goes with their hearing device. And for both of these, and this is the part that we think is really the kicker to all this is to be to no cost to the parents. And so that's just a quick little explainer about 504s and IEPs. And this lawsuit that Attorney Neal and I have been researching and following is Texas versus Becerra, and they are seeking to adjust this 504 plan. I'm going to let you explain it, and because I know you're going to do it perfectly, but that's just
Okay.
where we are with that. So I hope everybody understood what I was saying about 504 plans and IEPs and the difference as we seek to move forward.
Yeah, and the way, and I like to look at it a little bit differently, or the way that I utilize the 504 and the IEP. Um, I do it a little bit differently, or think about it a little bit differently. And there's different ways to use the 504 and IEP.
Right.
The 504 is accommodations. But the way I like to explain it, although you can use it different ways, is when I think 504, I think disabilities, but I think about the disabilities that don't affect you every day.
Mm,
Uh, you might be fine, but if you have a migraine, that's going to take you out.
right.
And in my practice, that's when I try to get 504s for kids. Or if you have a seizure disorder, you're going to
Right.
be out that day, and you're going to need to make up that instruction time, or allergies, things like that. And then with the IEP, of course, you get all of the accommodations in a 504 plus specialized instruction.
Right.
Um, and I know that the 504 is used a lot for ADHD.
It is,
Um,
but a parent can have a 504 and an IEP. I do want the audience to know that a child can actually have both of those. And I think from an educational perspective as a teacher, um, what I've seen, and I think what most of my colleagues have seen, is that you can get a 504 plan put in place a lot faster than an IEP because there aren't necessarily quite as many hoops to jump through. Because you can deal with the pediatrician or whoever, whichever the doctor is for that child who has diagnosed that child will have the documentation, everything that's used to justify for those accommodations. Whereas when you get into the weeds of an IEP, you may start having to involve like district personnel doing psychological testing. Before they'll do psychological testing, they're going to want to rule out that there's a vision or hearing impairment. There's typically a RTI process, which is response to intervention, to see if there are other things that can be tried that can eliminate the difficulties that that child has been having before all the psychological testing, everything goes into place. So I
Yeah.
think for timeliness, the five, and for definitely for medical, 504 is best, especially if it's physical and medical, I think would be a really good way to put it. I think it's a lot of times it's hard to prove certain things when it's related to your brain or your mind. Like I had a child a few years ago that was diagnosed with an auditory processing disorder. That's not something you can observe a child having, you know. But the conversations, you know, that I had with the parent, where the parent was, well, the child is learning. That she said, well, I don't think she's working. I don't think she's working. I'm like, yeah, she's working. She's like, but we go over things and she's not understanding. I was like, but I see her face and I see that she's making an attempt. I said, there's something going on. I said, I can't explain it. And but who was able to figure out and explain it? The school psychologist. And they figured out it was an auditory processing disorder, that you can catch that with a naked eye. You know, like you can catch something else, like a child needing glasses or something and being like severely visually impaired. You can catch something like that by looking at it.
Yes. Okay. So regarding the lawsuit, I kind of thought the best way to kind of go over this would be to sort of reverse engineer it.
Okay.
So I just decided to start at the very end. What are they asking for? What do they want to accomplish with this lawsuit? Um, and the first thing, and there was seven things that they wanted to do, and I'll just kind of go through each one. The first thing they wanted to do is issue a permanent order stopping the enforcement of the final rule. Okay, what is the final rule? The Biden administration issued a new rule, and they issued that rule on May 9th, 2024, that changes federal disability law by including gender dysphoria as a disability under Section 504 of the Rehab Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, why did they just do this all of a sudden? And it wasn't really an all of the sudden thing. It was actually based on another lawsuit, William versus Kincaid. And let me kind of.
Did you want to share your screen?
I don't think I need to do that. I'm just trying to get where I pulled up the actual holding. Georgia is in the 11th Circuit, and this was a Fourth Circuit case, and it was called William versus Kincaid. And it established that gender dysphoria qualified as a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehab Act, or Section 504. The court ruled that the ADA's exclusion of gender identity disorders not resulting from a physical impairment does not apply to gender dysphoria. It involves clinically significant distress and may have a physical basis. The decision allowed the plaintiff, a transgender woman incarcerated in Virginia, to proceed with her Americans with Disabilities Act claim after alleging mistreatment and denial of medical care related to the gender dysphoria. So that's where this new rule came from. Now, prior to this, this was news to me. I did not know that gender identity issues have always been excluded.
Right.
This was something I did not learn until this lawsuit actually came out. So it's kind of interesting. They want a physical component to this, and I'm assuming, but what does that even mean?
Right.
Because I've represented kids that were born with, you know,
Like hermaphroditic or something like that.
right, and
Right.
then and so they've got both chromosomes. But it was also, when I was doing a little reading, it also included, I guess, hormone therapies that
Therapies
might change your
to make you
chemical
more one
makeup.
gender than the other, like have you leaning more one way. Yeah.
Right. So that's what this new rule is about.
But
So
what they started it about. That's what they're pretending it's about, is what I would really say. That's the guise it's under. Is because we discussed earlier, I was watching someone explaining that had gone through it saying, oh, well, the first 30 pages are about gender I don't want to say it incorrectly, not dysmorphia, but it's about that, about transgenderism for the first 30 pages. But then after that, then you get into the other plans. And I get into that a little bit about what that could look like in the classroom.
sure.
So if my personal child, one of my children does have food allergies, and she has a 504 plan for her food allergies. If they decided that, and everybody in our district gets free lunch. So let's say they decided they didn't have to cover 504 plans anymore, they would not have to provide her an allergen safe lunch. So then it would be the onus would be on me as a parent to make sure that she has it, which we've done until now because she's made it to middle school, because it is such a big responsibility. But, as a taxpayer, I would like to think that my child should have access to the same things as everyone else. Again, having that equity. And then thinking about, I know I have several friends who have children who are deaf, hard of hearing, like we talked about those amplifying boxes. So then you say, well, that's not the school's fault. They don't need to, supply that, or large print writing, all these types of things. And I think it's important to note that these, for anyone who is acting like this is a good idea, they are probably not in the classroom, number one. We already have a major teacher shortage. We oftentimes work really hard and really long for not a lot of pay. And typically, if you want to get a pay increase in education, you have to get out of the classroom, which is very unfortunate, because in some places, they do actually have master teachers that they pay more for being excellent teachers and training other teachers and helping them improve the profession. But that's not the case all over right now, unfortunately. So a lot of times, some of the best and brightest, they move to administration to get, an increase in finance for all the work and time they've done, which you can't blame them for. But between that, the, low pay, a lot of things that changed after COVID, we've had a terrible, terrible teacher shortage. And a lot of people are saying, I can't do the work. They're just saying they can't do the volume of work that's being required. And if you take this away from a classroom, you just think about how hard it would be to have a child in your room. Let's say they do have a 504 plan and it's for ADHD or something, and they're supposed to get pulled out for small group testing. And then you can't do that. They may bomb every single standardized test that they're using to justify funding and other things for your school and your district. Um, when we look at other things, you say 1 second. Um, so when we look at those things and we think about how it is going to affect the children, it's major. It's going to affect the children. It's going to affect the teachers, because they're going to hit a sense of overwhelm.
Yep. All right. Well, the second thing that they want to do is declare that the final rule violates the Administrative Procedure Act. So the new rule now includes gender dysphoria as a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehab Act, even though the federal law has specifically excluded gender identity disorders from the definition of disability. So the people that are in favor of trying to get rid of Section
504
504.
protections.
They are saying that gender dysphoria is just the same thing as gender identity. Um, and then the other side is saying gender dysphoria is different from gender identity. From
Mhm.
my perspective,
Right.
I got to be honest with you, it kind of sounds like a distinction without much of a difference.
Mm.
So I kind of see their argument. I don't agree with it. I think it should anybody that has a disability should be covered. You should get the help. I mean, and that's what they're saying, that this rule violates the Administrative Procedure Act. The third thing that they're trying to do is make the final rule unlawful and just cancel that rule and not all of Section 504. Um,
Which is
although,
helpful to some, but not to everyone.
well, here's what they're trying to say. This final rule extends the 504 protections to gender dysphoria, which was not included before, and that therefore it introduces new rules about integration and discrimination, and they just don't know what to do with that, and I guess they
Mhm.
just don't want to learn.
No, they're not interested in learning, not being inclusive, not learning
Yeah.
about that.
And then it says the final rule imposes new conditions on states without clarifying and informing them of the changes. So
Mm-hmm.
states are either forced to comply
Mm-hmm.
um, and accommodate folks with gender dysphoria somehow. There's really no guidance on that, or lose their federal funding. And they're saying that that's coercive.
It isn't it though?
That's what they're saying. This is just so unfair. And
And
then
it,
they're saying that the final rule is unconstitutional because it creates new requirements that weren't in the original uh, Section
504.
504 Rehab Act, and states couldn't have known about them when they accepted the federal funds. So the states are basically saying, we accepted these federal funds. There are obligations that we agreed to do as a condition of taking these funds, and now all of a sudden you've changed the
The
rules on
rules.
this.
Right.
That's what they're saying. But the fourth thing they're asking is not to just get rid of this rule. They want to declare all of Section 504 of the Rehab Act unconstitutional. And I'm guessing it's in lieu of, you either
Yeah.
get rid of the final rule or declare Section 504 unconstitutional.
And that's the one that gets my bristles up right there. Like the even
Mm-hmm.
just the consideration of it, because at the end of the day, everybody is paying taxes. Especially if you're in Georgia, because we pay state income taxes too. We pay a lot. And unfortunately, Georgia is one of the states involved in this lawsuit. If you want to reach out to our attorney general, that is Christopher Carr. I've called several times, but oddly enough, you give him a call and then it will put you on hold, and then you'll go through and it'll say, "We're sorry, no one's available to take your call." Click. But I still would encourage people to reach out either in writing, in an email, or by phone. But his number is 404-635-7200. Again, Attorney General for the state of Georgia, Christopher M. Carr, 404-635-7200. And a lot of other advocates such as us, are looking at reaching out to the attorney generals in their states, because the other states that are included in this are Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, and West Virginia. So there are a lot of states involved. If you heard your state's name, you need to reach out to your attorney general. I mean, I guess if you can't reach out to the attorney general, I would start reaching out to state representatives who maybe have a better chance of getting in contact with that attorney general for you, because they are supposed to work for us. We have a representative democracy, they are supposed to be able to represent our interests. And I don't know about you, but my child is my interest. That's
Yeah.
what I'm concerned about. And I know I'm surely my government, after taking all my little monies for the last 20 years of me being in education and working a job, a salary, surely you're not going to tell me that now you can't provide accommodations for my children at this point. So I
You
encourage
know,
parents to be loud. And a lot of us sped parents, I don't want to say sped parents, but exceptional moms and dads, a lot of us suffer silently and quietly, and we deal with a lot of things by ourselves. And this is just not the time to be quiet. This is the time to make sure everybody knows what's going on, because a lot of people are covered under 504, and they probably don't even realize that their rights are, in danger right now.
yeah, I've also got an email for him too. Did you give that out? I can't.
I did not, but you can, if you say it, I'll type it into the chat, or you can type it in, whichever.
Yeah, let me look that up real quick. Because not everybody's comfortable making a phone call.
Right. Well, they didn't
Um,
answer anyway. So it was 15 minutes of my life I'll never get back. I was on hold for a good long while and told that someone was waiting to get back with me, and then picked up and it clicked, hung up, said no one was available after all of that. So
yeah, well, I did email him, and then I got an email back, um, and he basically just kind of lied, or it wasn't him that responded, but it was somebody.
someone from the office,
Yeah,
someone from the office
and they were like,
gave
"We're
information.
we're not trying to get rid of Section 504. We don't know what you're talking about."
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
now they have. I did look up the status of it. I just put his email in the chat.
So
I
CCAR
did look
at
at
law.ga.gov,
yes,
CCARR at law.ga.gov.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
But they have put kind of a pause on things, and I think they are kind of just focusing on getting rid of the rule and instead of the whole Section 504. But I mean, and I don't know, it's scary. But now with the section with them declaring the Section 504, the Rehab Act, unconstitutional, their rationale for finding it unconstitutional is they're saying lack of clear notice, retroactive conditions, unrelated conditions, and it's a coercive. They're saying because Section 504 imposes unclear guidance on how to accommodate, I guess, folks with gender dysphoria, that it's retroactive. We got the money, and then you change the rules on us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's coercive because now you put these, we would have never taken the money in the first place
If
or
we had known
agreed
you were going to
to.
hold us accountable in such a way,
Right. And so
basically.
that's their argument. And then they want the fourth thing, not the fourth thing. The fourth thing is they want to declare unconstitutional. The fifth is that they want to issue a permanent order stopping the enforcement of Section 504 based on all of those conditions. And then the other two are not even related. They want attorney's fees, of course, because the attorneys always win in these. They
Right.
always get paid no matter what. Um, you know what? I think maybe this is just some sort of coercive thing for attorneys to make monies. I don't know. And then they always ask the court to, provide any other relief
Mm-hmm.
that the court believes is just and fair. So that's basically the case in a nutshell. So it's a little bit broader than education, because the ADA and Section 4 cover
Right.
not just schools, but in the school context, this could be very, very, very bad.
It sounds
Very
like a
bad.
nightmare scenario to me as a teacher, just to be totally honest. Like I just can't even imagine not having things in place for these students. And their education is a job, but it's also, for a lot of us, it's a ministry. It's something that we pour our heart and our souls into, and we love our babies and we want them to do well. And if you take away the supports that we need to make sure that they can do well, it's kind of like we're just being thrown out into the wind. And almost like what you were saying at the beginning about your son, like the teacher would not have the supports or of what to do or have things available at her hands, or his hands to assist that learner. And you don't want a child sitting in class and not getting what they're entitled to, which is a fair and equitable free public education. That is what they are entitled to. That is what our tax dollars go for. And to sit up here and again say that we have even less money for education, and you think about how much money we pour into wars and all these billionaire tax, you know, it's just
Yeah,
wild. It's just wild because our children are the most important resource that we have. They are literally the future. If we can't
yeah.
raise them to be, for them to learn, how are we going to have the next generation of doctors, of lawyers, of teachers? We're not going to have that if we can't provide them with an adequate education. And that will affect us economically further in the future.
Yeah, and I just feel like this is the case also talked about how this was going to affect, I guess, Medicare and Medicaid and those state programs, because Section 504 is all about
Yes.
access in this context to education. And so they're going to take this whole just gender dysphoria, gender identity issue
Right.
and just try to use it to just
Gut
burn the house
everything.
down, it looks
Yeah.
like. Um, but when I was reading this, and they teach you to do this in law school, play the devil's advocate, and what would this look like if they had to accommodate kids with gender dysphoria? Would they have to rework the bathroom? I mean, I don't know how this would actually work in real life, but I mean, I just think that we could figure it out,
Yeah.
you know?
But it's a matter of wanting to. And
Yeah.
I think that's the issue. We have to keep encouraging people to demonstrate empathy, like we're discussing, and to be willing to learn about differences amongst people and being okay with it and learning that different is not deficient, and that there are all types of good things that come out of us being unique individuals, as opposed to vilifying particular groups of people or saying they are not good enough or worthy enough because they may need a little extra help in one area of their life. Um, and I think this is just one of those things that's gonna, add fuel to the fire. And I mean, I can honestly say, and I think you'll agree, hell hath no fury like a exceptional mom or exceptional dad scorn. We'll go to war for our babies. And they picked the right demographic to go after, because we're not going to let this rest. We are going to continue to reach out to legislators and other people and our attorney general. We're going to push back against these policies because this policy could hurt. It's definitely would hurt children, and it would hurt teachers. And we don't want that, and it'll hurt our school systems. We don't want that at all. And
Yeah, it's gonna hurt everybody.
yes, and I wish that I honestly wish that some of the districts would start talking about it, because it's kind of like we're just trucking along, trucking along, trucking along, but it feels like there's somebody trying to start a fire in our house, like it has started a fire at one end of the house, but we're at the other end relaxing, you know, watching TV, having a cool drink, but part of the house is on fire, and we need to know, how we need to. I think we need some help in knowing what to expect and how to deal with some of these things that people are trying to do to change what education looks like for our babies. And we need to make sure that we're fighting for them, because I think what you said about the money was like a really big portion of it. I think a lot of the issues in SPED are related to people looking at these children like dollar signs instead of looking at them as individuals with, unique attributes, gifts, talents, all these types of things. They're looking at them at dollar signs. They're more than dollar signs. So,
Yeah. Well, just out of curiosity, I did a little chat GPT thing.
okay.
And it said accommodations for kids with gender dysphoria. Um, so I'm just gonna, just because I think it's interesting, see what they would have to do. Okay. There would be name and pronoun use. You'd have to
Okay.
address those issues. Restroom and locker access.
Hmm.
Now, this is one I hadn't thought of, but dress code issues. which I guess that would be,
Yeah.
it's always been an issue, though. I
Mhm.
think dress code has always been kind of
Vague.
a thing. Yeah. Participation in activities and sports, maybe providing mental health and counseling support. Here's a big one: protection from bullying and harassment. I could see that being a big issue,
Yeah.
but it's going to be a big issue regardless
Yeah.
of Section 504 because there are laws on that too. I mean,
Hmm.
Georgia has laws on that. So, anyway, the landscape is changing, but yeah,
Hopefully it won't change, but they're trying to
hopefully it
change the
won't.
landscape, but we're going to push back against it.
Yeah. But maybe we do want it to because I never knew that these kids were excluded. Gender identity was excluded at all.
But I think that's because you're the type of person that you would do what's right for a kid anyway. And I
Well,
think that's the whole problem. There are some people that are going to do the right thing for other people because it's the right thing to do. And there's other people that because they see a difference, they're just not even going to bother.
and I can see this being a problem for some teachers with their religious beliefs. Are they going to want to accommodate somebody that, you know,
I hear you. I mean, I just haven't seen that in my Bible. Just, for someone to justify mistreating someone. Like if we're going straight up New Testament, I feel
yeah,
like half the
agreed.
people that are getting vilified right now are the same people that Jesus would be feeding and spending his evenings with. So,
Absolutely.
and I think that people need to actually look at what do they say, the words in red, look at the things that he actually said and treat people accordingly. Because when they were asking him what's the most important commandment, it was like love the Lord thy God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself. And I think this issue boils down to loving our neighbors as ourselves. It's not my job to determine what's right or wrong for someone else or their child. It's my job to be an empathetic and compassionate and caring citizen, individual, and teacher. That is my job.
And the law is one thing because when I was thinking when we start talking about this tonight, I don't want to get into politics, but this is
You
very
can't.
political.
You can't do it
You
without
can't
talking
avoid
about
it.
politics.
And there's the religious aspect of it too. And then there's certain segments of our population that are in control of the government right now that really do kind of want to meld the religious and
And see, that would be a whole different talk for us. Like I'm trying to like reel it in, you know, but I definitely I hear what you're saying and I agree. But again, I think we just have to, even if someone is back to even with the lawsuit itself, is being billed as one thing, but it
yeah.
really is something else entirely. Like it covers a wide array of things, but they're selling it like, oh, well, we're just focused on this one thing, but it takes from everyone. And I think that's the whole thing with a lot of the policies and things that are being rolled out. They're being billed one way, but they're actually something else. And I think the best thing we can do for people is what we're doing right now is educating them and making sure they understand because a lot of people have started to come out and say they realize that some of the things that they voted for actually are working against them in their best interests. So I think that education is a large piece, not just for children, but also for adults, especially
Yeah.
before they go in voting booths.
Well,
So
I'm just curious though, has anybody on this that's online right now encountered kids that are struggling with this?
I haven't had a child myself. Now, when I was getting my EDS, I know there was a teacher in my cohort who had a child that I know was a transgender issue and the child did have some accommodations, but it was I guess a young lady, but she identified a little bit more with being a young man in the elementary level, but she still used the ladies' restroom and things like that instead of having like a separate restroom. And they said, because we actually talked about it in one of our cultural competency classes, and they were saying that, some of the little girls from another class who didn't know that child said, there's a boy in the restroom. And
Wow.
right, but that goes to why you would see the purpose in having a separate restroom for that child, so it's not turning into an issue and everyone's, looking at that child and setting them up in a place where they're made to feel other. And I think that's the big thing, is being made to feel other, as opposed to being included. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think the yeah, I think that was like one of the things that the teacher was saying that she was having concerns with, because she wanted to make sure she was treating the child properly, using her pronouns and everything correctly, but also having to deal with how the other children, education, I guess, education, and dealing with how the other children react to that child. But again, I think a lot of it is just you teach children empathy. That's why books are getting banned, but I'm not going to get into that. Because a lot of the books that they're trying to ban are books that teach empathy. Like one of the books I read with my class the other week, a Jacqueline Woodson book, Each Kindness, that's one of those books where it talks about how you treat people, and that your kindness ripples out into the world, and that sometimes when you're unkind to people, you can't undo the unkindness, so you need to be mindful of how you treat people, or the day you begin, about everyone is different, but that's okay. Everyone's experience is different, but that's okay. It doesn't If this child is eating this food from Korea, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with her compared to a child eating a cheeseburger over here. Just little simple things, but it's just about exposure and empathy and kindness. And we just need more of that right now.
You
But
ain't kidding.
but I think this is a good time. If anybody has any questions for my favorite educational attorney, please put it in the chat box, because she's amazing. And I mean, you can't ask for a more passionate attorney for your child if you need one. She's been through it. She is a twice exceptional mom herself. She has fought the good fight, and she keeps doing it all the time for other people's children, and making sure that they are getting things they need for 504 IEPs, and are being treated fairly, and are having the proper accommodations they need to be successful in
Yeah.
in the public school, and I guess also in private school too, right?
Absolutely, because that's the other thing that they really haven't focused on here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, because the Section 504 basically covers governmental agencies and discrimination in that context, the ADA would cover private schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're not really going after the ADA.
Not yet, but I think that's something to pay attention to, again, when we're thinking about these voucher programs and all those types of things. And you and I've seen each other out several times, like even like why some of these parents may even be leaning towards more of the micro school situation, or having a pod school, because you may not be able to afford private school, but you might have your child where a child that's not being served in public school. And with all these other, I think, well, I'm not going to say I think, I know for a fact there have been things put out since this administration has come into place that have actively discouraged parents against public education, which I think is terrible, that they're telling parents to pull their children out of public education. But with all these things happening, for some parents, that is turning into an alternative to them, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, when they think the private schools, they're thinking religious private schools, but there's some very good ones that cater to autism. I mean, right here in Macon, we've got the blind school for
The Georgia
blindness,
Academy
and
of the
then
Blind,
right,
Woodfield Academy,
and I'm
Roberts
thinking,
Academy for Dyslexia.
yeah. So, so if you've got disabilities and the school really can't accommodate you, and I'm thinking, maybe this whole gender dysphoria thing, maybe there's somebody that could open up a school
Right.
specifically to address their
Their
need.
need. Hmm.
But it's really sort of a double-edged sword, because I really feel like for my kids, I always wanted them to be around a variety of people. And so you're sort of reinstituting into
Like a separate, being
segregation
like
again.
segregation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's there's a guy in Albany, and he has like a school that's just for boys, which I think is fantastic.
Right.
And he sort of teaches them, things that are specific to boys, but then doesn't really help you.
If you
My
have a young
boyfriend
lady.
actually grew up
Yeah.
in, and he went to school with an all boys Catholic school. So I think it
Hmm.
sort of impacted the way he relates with women. He doesn't really
Right.
have the skills
Right. Right.
like most
Hmm.
people. But,
Yeah.
um, anyway, lots of interesting stuff happening around here.
It is well, I have a few questions for you, like before we end here. What
Okay.
would be, if you could give any advice to any parent on the call or grandparent on the call right now who is concerned about their children or grandchildren's rights, moving forward, or even the current state of things with the IEP or 504, what would you recommend they do?
Well, first of all, I would relax
That's me. Let me
some of
relax.
because some of this stuff is not going to be well, taking away the accommodations is a big deal, but you do have to remember that that's Section 504. We still have the Individuals
The
with
IEPs.
Disabilities Education Act. But then a lot of people are panicked about maybe the Department of Education is going away. Well, let me tell you something. The Department of Education wasn't all that great at enforcing
Some of the
individuals'
laws, right?
right. And there is the Department of Justice. So there's still the Department of Justice, for now anyway, that can enforce all of your rights under Section 504 and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. They actually do have an educational opportunity section. This is the Department of Justice now. And they will enforce civil rights. So there are some protections out there. And don't forget that ADA still applies. So it's just a weird dynamic. So
And
don't give
so
up hope.
we're hopeful that they're not going to go after ADA yet, because I mean it's a
Well,
lot of things coming down and coming down quickly.
they are, and I got a feeling they're probably going to go after the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. I mean, I don't even know what we're
Up
about to
against,
be
right,
in for, but for now, um, there's still enforcement mechanisms out there. So even though the Department of Education, uh, you can still theoretically get some help there. I would go to the
right.
Department of
Just
Justice. There's still the court system um,
for now.
for now. For now. um, so yeah, there's still some workarounds for all of this, uh, but I definitely do not want to see the entire. I mean, they're taking this one little rule and trying to gut the whole
The whole
Section
thing.
504.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But I would say, don't lose hope yet. And I'm telling you, I think if we band together and give Chris Carr a hard time,
Yes. And
um,
he's feeling the heat. I heard one of my friends told me they got on, I think, Facebook, and they said he was flooded. I don't use Facebook yet, but they said it was flooded with people very angry and very upset about him not answering the phone, and about just even the thought of Georgia being involved in this is just crazy.
well,
Um,
it is crazy. And I still don't even think they care about us really, even though we complain. I feel like maybe we need to figure out some way to go after their money. They seem to care a lot about that.
yes, they do. Yes, they do. And I mean that goes into legislation, because the legislators hold the purse strings, but how many of them are on our side and are going to work for these children, and they really, really need to invest in it. But I want you to talk a little bit. I want to make sure you have a little bit of space to talk about what you do as an educational attorney compared to like what someone would get if they got a special education advocate, so that people know the difference between what you can provide compared to an advocate, and how you could help them if needed.
Okay. Well, there are some very good non-attorney advocates out there. I will say that. And they can do just about everything that I can do, unless you have to go to court or if you're suing a school. Um, Advocates can file state complaints. They can file ethics complaints against educators if necessary. They can file complaints with the Department of Education, the Department of Justice. They can do all those things. They can represent you in a manifestation determination, a tribunal. Um, they can do all of those things. Where I come in is if you have to go to court, um, if you need to sue for any reason, most in the educational context, most of the time it's in the due process context, and basically, maybe some of you don't know, but if you have that's the most serious thing that you can do is file due process against a school. When you're very fed up, that would be the go-to. That's the most nuclear option, and they do take those very seriously. Then parents can do it on their own. I don't recommend it. And typically, you have two sessions with the school meetings. They're called a resolution session and then mediation. You can try to negotiate a settlement with the school to get what you want for your child. And then if that doesn't work out, then we're having what's called a due process hearing, which is a bench trial. So
Right.
we present our case, evidence, we put on witnesses, we have expert witnesses, all of those sorts of things. And going back to the advocates can go to IEP meetings and 504 meetings with you too. I mean, I do everything that those folks do. I'm just able to go to court or consult with parents and navigate them through that very real legal process. A list. Where can I find a list of special education advocates? That's a very good question. COPA website has a list of special education advocates, but there's also one that's called Yellow Pages for Kids.
Right, I hadn't heard of that one.
That is everybody can, and actually yellowpagesforkids.com. Advocates, and if y'all are in that, if you represent people, even on a lay basis, I would encourage you can go to yellowpagesforkids.com and put a free ad on there.
Mm-hmm.
That's through rightslaw.com, which is, as you know, is the #1 special education website. It's affiliated with them. And so it doesn't just have advocates on there. You've got speech therapists. You've got lots of providers on there. So that's one place that you can find a list of special education advocates. Every time I've ever seen, there's a couple of special education groups. There's a Georgia IEP support group that I'm a member of. It's on Facebook. And people will go, I'm looking for a special education advocate. And then you'll get all these people that just kind of, pop up and say, hey, they'll say, hey, I'm here. And then I always have to go on there and say, well,
You're right.
Attorneys can't approach you.
Right.
Because it's against the ethics rule.
Right. So they have to reach out to you. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, and if they wanted to get your services, what are the best ways they can get in touch with you? I think you put we can put your email address in the chat, and you can also
my website.
And yeah, your website. And April Kelly Neal is also listed on COPA. She's one of the advocate attorneys listed on COPA.
And my email.
And you can see her logo behind her for student support, advocacy, and disability. And so her website is ssadisability.org. Again, ssadisability.org.
Yeah, and it sounds sort of misleading, but I worked for the Social Security Administration for 20 years. So I also do Social Security disability too.
It's called being multi-talented. We love you for it. You can do all the things, and we're very concerned about our Social Security money as well. So don't
Yes.
worry.
And I do juvenile defense work too. So that's
And I'm sure there have probably been cases where you've seen some overlap between some things in education and some things with juvenile defense, probably.
always. And the
Yeah,
judges don't seem to make the connection that some of this behavior you might be seeing that you think is illegal might actually be a symptom of their disability.
right. Because I
Yeah.
believe 70% of inmates have dyslexia, I believe is what they're saying now. Yeah.
Oh, I was so furious because I had a kid that, just as an example, and I was representing him in truancy. He wasn't going to school and he lived across the street. And the
Wow.
judge was like, he just doesn't want to go. Well, yeah, he just doesn't. But why?
Right. There's a rationale.
Why? And so I asked the school if they had done a functional behavioral assessment. Of course, they hadn't. And then I finally we figured out that the kid could not read. He couldn't read, and he was embarrassed to go to school.
Which will do that. I mean, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for either myself or for Attorney Neal? Well, we've been on for an hour, and I'm just so appreciative of you and your time and all the things that
My
you're
pleasure.
doing for children in Georgia. What was the name of the other group that I saw you with the other week? It wasn't Georgia Cares, was it?
Georgia.
Or Georgia Can? Georgia Can?
Georgia Can is one. Yeah, they're a group that does a lot of I mean, they're good. They do a lot of, they're very busy this time of year because they put out a lot of initiatives to expand school choice. And not everybody's a fan of school choice.
Right,
I am. I don't believe in taking away anybody's choice, regardless of the context of it.
right.
I just wish, and I don't think either party is consistent on that.
Right. And I mean,
I
I've
just,
taught public school and private school, I've seen it from both sides, and I think a lot of it boils down to what we said earlier about it being individualized per the child. And
yeah.
sometimes, one place may be set up better for a child than another place because Woodfield might be a really, really great alternative for some children who are struggling with autism in the regular ed classroom because of the, different I guess, with our schedule and how often we're able to go out and the ways we explore and teach and everything like that. So,
Well, can you imagine getting food stamps and then having the government tell you what short store you could shop at? I
yeah,
mean, it's kind of that's how I
yeah,
feel about the public
yeah.
school system.
And I mean, at the
Anyway,
end, it is tax dollars, and all of us are paying taxes in some way, shape, or form anyway. So it's not the government's money, and I want people to remember that it's our tax dollars. Then the dollars are supposed to work for us and provide services for us and for our children that we need. But I think we're good. I don't think anybody else has any other questions. Last call. Well, I don't. I see one new message just popped up. Oh, it's just you saying
what's
thank
his
you.
name? Was that me?
Well, again, I want to say thank you so much, Attorney April Kelly Neal. My tagline is advocacy is an act of love, and you definitely have shown your love as a mom and as an attorney, and how you fight for other people's kids. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I learned something new. I love your passion for children and for education, and it is very much needed, especially right now. And I'm sure that you're going to make sure that we keep informed if there's any other changes with this lawsuit and other things that come down the pipeline so we can make sure people are informed. And I will keep sending people your way. And like I said, my information is listed. I have Attorney Neal's information on my website, www.twiceexceptionalmom.com. And she's listed under one of the resources for Middle Georgia, and COPA's listed on there as well. And you can find her information and information for other educational advocates on that website. And again, just thank you so much for all you do for the kids in Middle Georgia and all you've done for me. I appreciate you.
Oh, well, I appreciate you too. And y'all take care and power to our pupils.
Yes,
That's my
yes.
tagline.
We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it.
Well,
Thank
y'all have
you.
a very good evening. It's a pleasure speaking to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much.